My former spouse, my wife, had an affair with my brother, resulting in the birth of his child. Consequently, my family, who have historically held negative sentiments towards me, have begun to request financial assistance following my recent promotion. I am 29 years of age and divorced from my wife, who is 27 years old. She had been engaged in an extramarital relationship with my estranged brother for approximately 2 months prior to our divorce. Initially, she attempted to persuade me that the pregnancy was unplanned. However, my brother's frequent visits led me to doubt her account, prompting me to investigate further. I accessed her phone and discovered evidence of her infidelity. She ultimately admitted to having an affair with my brother, stating that she had no other options. My family and I had been estranged since I left home at 18. They consistently treated me as an outsider, even within my own family. My brother was regarded as the golden child. I initially found it peculiar to commence the celebration for me without my presence. However, upon seeing the cake, I was overcome with emotion. I finally confronted my parents and inquired as to why they had not held a celebration for an actual, tangible accomplishment. In response, they revealed that, subsequent to my acceptance letter, they sought to ensure that my brother did not feel left out, leading them to instead throw him a party. Instead of expressing frustration, I was advised to strive to elevate my brother as well. This revelation left me profoundly distraught, prompting me to resolve that I would never return to them. I proceeded to fulfill my obligation to pay for my own college education. After graduating from college, I took out a loan and worked to support myself while renting a small apartment with a friend. I did not speak with my parents after moving out, and they did not attempt to contact me. Over time, however, my brother reached out to me online, expressing a desire to reconnect with me and my parents. Given the passage of time and the significant changes in my life, I was initially reluctant to engage in such a reunion. However, I eventually agreed to meet with them. My wife and I were leading a comfortable life, but I was uncertain about moving on from the events that had transpired with my parents. I ultimately agreed to meet with them, and the initial interactions were awkward and uncomfortable. However, they demonstrated a willingness to make amends for past actions, which compelled me to reciprocate. I extended an invitation to them as well, and I presumed it was an error on my part to introduce my brother to my former partner. They proceeded to engage in an affair, and she became pregnant. I was gratified when I learned of her pregnancy, as I had assumed the child was mine. However, as I previously mentioned, my brother subsequently, he began to visit with greater frequency following the discovery of the pregnancy. Initially, this did not cause me concern, however, as time progressed, the situation became increasingly peculiar. My brother would touch my wife's pregnant abdomen and speak into it. My ex attempted to reassure me that this was not a significant issue, yet I could not dispel the notion that my brother played a more pivotal role than he was willing to acknowledge. 6 months into the pregnancy, I decided to examine her phone while she was asleep. This revealed text messages between my ex-partner and my brother that confirmed my suspicions. These messages demonstrated that the child was, in fact, my brother's. Furthermore, my ex-partner had been involved with my brother for some time. Additionally, it became evident that my ex-partner had no intention of ever disclosing this information. She informed me that the child was not even mine. She and my brother planned to reveal the details of their affair after the child's birth. She intended to initiate divorce proceedings against me and then pursue a relationship with my brother, capitalizing on the financial resources provided by child support payments. I questioned her about the text messages she had sent. Although she initially denied it, she eventually admitted that it marked the end of my 2-year marriage. My parents, however, sided with my brother and my ex. Their assurances that they valued us equally proved to be empty words. When my ex and my brother announced our divorce on social media, the media and her decision to marry him resulted in my entire family offering unwavering support for their choice. There was no concern expressed about the impact on my mental health and the breach of trust caused by my ex's deception over the paternity of the child. In addition to the loss of my spouse, I also experienced the loss of my child, which was a profoundly painful experience. My parents informed me that this was the optimal outcome and once again refused to acknowledge that my brother had wronged me. They advised me to rejoice at the happiness of my ex-brother and join the celebrations. I terminated my relationship with them, which further complicated the dissolution of my marriage. My wife received a substantial financial settlement, which she obtained through my family's support during the divorce proceedings. My wife and her legal counsel presented a narrative that portrayed me as a toxic and controlling individual, which ultimately led to her resignation from her job. My family members reinforced this narrative, despite the fact that it was her own decision to leave her job. My family's decision to cut me off was predicated on my misogynistic attitude and temper tantrums. Consequently, I was unable to present a compelling case for reconciliation, resulting in significant financial losses during the divorce proceedings. However, I was fortunate to retain ownership of the marital residence upon the dissolution of the marriage. I was relieved to have reached this point and to be free from the continued involvement with these individuals. It is unfortunate that there is no waiting period for a divorce in my jurisdiction. However, I am grateful that I was able to finalize the divorce without undue delay. My wife did not contest the divorce, so I was able to conclude the proceedings expeditiously, thereby facilitating my transition to the next phase of life. It was challenging to overcome the memories of the past, but I immersed myself in work and endeavored to improve myself, with the aim of expeditiously moving on from this unfortunate episode. This strategy proved effective, as evidenced by the recent promotion I received, which included a more advantageous position, salary, and company car. I was immensely gratified by this turn of events and chose to celebrate with a solo dinner date. I had planned to dine at one of my favorite restaurants, but I made the mistake of posting about it online. Within a day or two, my mother contacted me and asked me to come visit them. I was perplexed as to what they could possibly want from me now, given that we hadn't even spoken after the divorce was finalized and they had supported my ex and her lies. I initially attempted to ignore it, but she persisted, calling me relentlessly. Eventually, when nothing else worked, she showed up at my offices and refused to leave. A dispute with the receptionist, which was somewhat embarrassing, prompted me to pledge that I would visit within a few days. This ultimately persuaded her to leave. A couple of days later, I finally visited my family. They had utilized the settlement amount to relocate to a larger residence, enabling them to accommodate the infant, who had been born just over 3 weeks prior. I surmised that the alimony was also being utilized to cover the household expenses. However, I was relatively indifferent to this outcome, given that the alimony was at this juncture, the alimony constituted a negligible portion of my income, and I was thus able to afford it. My brother was absent, and my ex was asleep, so I was the sole focus of my parents' attention. I refrained from engaging in idle chatter and instead bided my time, awaiting their inevitable disclosure. After approximately 5 minutes of silence, my father finally broke the silence, stating that my brother had been terminated from his position at the alimony and settlement were no longer sufficient. They then proceeded to inform me that they had seen the announcement regarding my promotion and were seeking my assistance. As they were given the current financial constraints, it is evident that my parents have been retired for an extended period. My brother is unemployed, and my former spouse is unlikely to resume her professional duties in the near future. The alimony provided was insufficient to meet the expenses associated with a family of 5, particularly with a newborn in the household. I was taken aback by their audacity in approaching me for financial assistance, given the circumstances. I was so disconcerted that I was rendered speechless for several minutes. However, upon regaining my composure, I resolved I was under no obligation to engage with this situation. I simply rose from my seat and departed without uttering a word. Upon reaching the door, I discovered my brother stationed outside. My parents urged me to remain where I was and hear them out, and my brother appeared somewhat disconcerted by my presence. I remained silent and commenced my departure. The precipitation was considerable, and the distance to my vehicle was brief. Consequently, I was thoroughly soaked. My disposition was already unfavorable, and this incident served to exacerbate it. My parents and brother subsequently pursued me, and while I was searching for my keys in my pocket, they requested my assistance one final time. This time, it was my brother who was making the appeal. He has consistently exhibited a self-assured and arrogant demeanor, a direct consequence of the manner in which our parents interacted with us. It was therefore somewhat unusual to observe him seeking my assistance. It is evident that he had to overcome significant resistance to do so, suggesting that their assertion regarding the challenging phase was indeed accurate. I subsequently became visibly agitated and informed them that I wished to be left alone. I informed them that they could beg on the streets if they were truly in need of money, as a stranger who was unaware of their circumstances was more likely to empathize with their situation than I was. Despite this, I proceeded to enter my vehicle and depart, leaving them to endure the rain. I must admit that I derived a certain satisfaction from this act, given that my family has consistently treated me with disregard throughout my life. It has been 2 days since this incident occurred, and I find myself questioning my initial assessment. My mother has been contacting me via text message, which has led me to reconsider my stance. I experience feelings of guilt for not providing assistance to my family members. I am aware that I possess sufficient resources to offer them financial support, yet I hesitate to do so. Despite my willingness to provide assistance, my family members have consistently taken actions that have caused me to question their trustworthiness. For instance, they sided with my ex-spouse during the divorce proceedings, which led me to withdraw my support. This decision was significant for me because I felt a sense of guilt about my actions. I then resolved to disengage from the situation. However, I subsequently recognized that they had been engaging in similar behavior towards me throughout my life. Even during the divorce proceedings, they had undermined me. Consequently, I saw no reason to refrain from doing the same to them. I informed my mother that I would no longer tolerate her repeated inquiries. Otherwise, I would be compelled to seek legal counsel, which would likely result in unfavorable outcomes for her. This prompted my brother to visit me at my residence. A few days ago, he informed me that, while he felt sorry for the way I had been treated throughout my childhood, he could not help but feel that he was inherently superior to me. This, he believed, was the reason why he had been treated in the same manner. He also advised me to cease behaving in an unusual manner towards our parents, as they were merely acting in a way that any other normal parent would have done in their position. Instead of holding a grudge, he suggested, I should help them out of their difficult situation. He was espousing the views of a child, and I found his rhetoric to be absurd. I informed him that rather than attempting to discredit me and influence me to assist them, he should be seeking employment and not engaging in such futile pursuits. This remark seemed to elicit a strong emotional response, prompting him to become verbally aggressive. He accused me of being envious of not only our parents but also of my former partner. My wife favored him over me, and I was retaliating by refusing to provide financial assistance to my family. I did not engage in any form of confrontation and merely concurred with his assertion that my actions were driven by a desire for vengeance. I was aware that there was little I could do to alter the situation, yet he became enraged and threatened to pursue me and force me to comply with his demands. I was under the impression that he was attempting to intimidate me. He attempts to do so, but it is futile because I am aware that he is incapable of taking any action against me. I am unperturbed. 3 days ago, my brother visited me and attempted to persuade me to assist them. However, he was unsuccessful. My parents have previously attempted the same, but it did not culminate in a favorable outcome. Consequently, this time, my former partner telephoned me. I was initially reluctant to respond, but ultimately decided to do so, as if I did not, they would likely return and consume more of my time. I engaged in a conversation with her, during which I was struck by the entitlement and cruelty I observed in her and her family. She began the conversation with a polite introduction, stating that, as I was already aware, she and her family were experiencing financial difficulties. Despite her recognition that I had no obligation to assist them, she urged me to consider doing so. She attempted to elicit my sympathy by referencing the financial support my parents had provided during my upbringing and her own efforts to be a supportive spouse. I did not accept her premise that my parents were indifferent to my well-being and consistently favored my brother. In fact, she had an affair with the same brother I had previously criticized. This strategy was ineffective. I informed her that while I felt remorse for their situation, I was already spending a significant amount of money on alimony, which she did not deserve given her infidelity. However, she was able to secure this financial arrangement due to my family's willingness to engage in deceit and manipulation. She then accused me of being the bad guy for their gain. She began to sob on the phone and informed me that I was being selfish and heartless, which was ironic given that I remained reluctant to assist her. She then stated that my brother was correct and that I had left her with no alternative but to involve the law, and that she intended to demand a higher alimony and take me to court in order to humiliate me once again. I would be interested to see them attempt this course of action, given that I was so emotionally drained and depressed at the time that I did not even attempt to fight back or try to resolve the issue. In order to demonstrate their assertions to be false, I acquiesced and consented to the payment of alimony, foregoing any attempt to substantiate the veracity of their claims. I was never toxic, controlling, or exhibited any of the characteristics they attributed to me. Consequently, there was no rationale for her infidelity, and she was not entitled to any financial compensation from the dissolution of our marriage. At that juncture, I was indifferent to the financial implications and was motivated solely by the desire to conclude the divorce. However, on this occasion, I am prepared to engage in a legal battle and to ensure that my family learns a profound lesson. Update 3 In a surprising turn of events, my wife filed for a higher alimony amount, despite my recent promotion. I was determined not to let this go unchallenged. I informed our mutual acquaintances of the situation and provided them with details of past events, as they were only aware of our separation and not the underlying reasons. They expressed shock at the developments. I requested their testimony against my wife. Ultimately, they concurred. I also informed my attorney that I wished to terminate the alimony arrangement entirely, as I did not believe my wife warranted such compensation. Over the past few days, I had amassed substantial evidence indicating that my parents and brother had consistently treated me as an inferior and were now pressuring me for financial assistance due to their awareness of my promotion. I had reached my limit and was determined to eliminate these obnoxious individuals once and for all, and I would not cease. Furthermore, I did not consider their feelings. I successfully persuaded some of my cousins, who had observed my treatment as an outsider in my own home during my upbringing, to advocate on my behalf. They were gracious enough to do so, despite our lack of close relationship. My lawyer was satisfied with the evidence we had gathered and informed me that it was compelling and we might be able to terminate the alimony payments. It was already known that my ex-wife had been unfaithful to me, but the reasons provided by her for the dissolution of the marriage were questionable. The portrayal of me as the villain and my brother as the hero who rescued her were both untruthful. Despite not having attempted to defend myself the previous time, I was determined to set the record straight this time. I did so by presenting several video testimonials that my friends and a couple of relatives had recorded in my favor. These testimonials proved that everything my family had said was untrue and that I was not the person they had made me out to be. They had presumed that they would be exonerated with minimal effort, as they had been previously. However, I had become less emotionally vulnerable and, in fact, had developed considerable resilience as a result of their actions. Consequently, the decision was made yesterday that I would no longer be required to pay alimony to my former spouse, given the emergence of new information. I was undoubtedly the most fortunate individual on earth when I realized that the matter was finally concluded. It was immensely gratifying to witness the abrupt disappearance of the self-satisfied demeanor of my family members, and my former spouse appeared to be, she was on the verge of tears, but I was no longer concerned with her emotional state and was simply exhausted from this ordeal. I had planned to go home and enjoy some takeout while watching a movie, but my family was relentless in their efforts to prevent me from experiencing any sense of joy. As I approached my house, I noticed my brother's car parked outside, which struck me as unusual. Despite my confusion, I proceeded inside. Upon arriving at my residence, I was met with an unexpected encounter. My family was stationed outside my door, impeding my entry. I was taken aback by this unexpected development and initially struggled to respond. However, I decided to maintain my composure and inform them that if they did not vacate my property, I would be forced to call the authorities. At this point, my father spoke up, expressing his displeasure with my actions. He proceeded to deliver a lengthy monologue, criticizing my lack of responsibility towards my family and accusing me of betraying their trust by refusing to assist them in their time of need. After he had finished speaking, I simply refused to answer or engage in any sort of conversation with him and stood there silently. I was not inclined to give them the satisfaction of getting a rise out of me because I surmised that their goal was to evoke an emotional response in me, which would eventually result in me doing something rash and ill-advised. However, I am not an unintelligent individual, and their desperate measures were not going to help their case at all, which they should have realized by then. My silence likely infuriated them even further. Despite my mother's insistence that I treat my father with respect and engage in conversation, I remained silent. I could discern a growing agitation among them, as they had evidently anticipated a significant altercation. However, despite their efforts, no such confrontation materialized. After further verbal provocation, my brother finally lost his composure and attempted to restrain me by grasping my collar. He then proceeded to strike me, but my father intervened and restrained him. During this episode, my father verbally attacked me, labeling me a jealous loser who would never succeed in life. The situation was rather comical, to say the least. From an unemployed individual still residing with his parents and requesting financial assistance from his sibling, I informed them that they needed to vacate the premises or else I would contact the authorities. Given their financial situation, it was likely that they would be unable to do so. They reluctantly departed, but not before my mother attempted one final appeal for financial support. This was unsuccessful, and they eventually left. It has been almost a day since that incident, and they have not attempted to contact me since. I am hopeful that this will remain the case. I will now proceed to the next narrative. Narrative 2, my wife was unfaithful to me with my stepdaughter's father, which prompted me to initiate divorce proceedings. My 33-year-old wife, 33-year-old female, was unfaithful to me in December. I discovered this when I happened to witness the act at her partner's residence. I had been aware of the situation for some time. The incident involved my stepdaughter. My father has been evicted from our property for years, and I have been responsible for managing his anger. I spent the entire day attending to the maintenance of the house, the animals, the garden, and her daughter. When we were married, she requested that I donate my vehicle, which was of a lower quality, so that I could drive one of her cars. I even contributed to the upkeep of the vehicle. I also engaged in remunerative activities on the premises of the legal practice at which she is employed. My working day commenced at 6 a.m. The time is 12 a.m. The incident in question occurred between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. On some nights, due to the numerous responsibilities I had assumed, I attempted to pardon her actions but continued to observe her engaging in conversations with him and even making arrangements to spend the night with other male acquaintances. Throughout this period, she consistently reassured me of her desire to salvage our relationship. However, she also subjected me to a cycle of emotional and psychological abuse, claiming that my failure to prevent her infidelity was responsible for her actions and resorting to tactics of manipulation and coercion to compel me to engage in sexual intercourse when I was not prepared for such a commitment. After I discovered her infidelity, she became pregnant. I requested a DNA test, but she opted for an abortion and subsequently accused me of being responsible for the pregnancy. Consequently, I decided to terminate our marriage and leave my employment. Since then, I have been supported by my family, and I continue to experience significant challenges, including difficulties with basic self-care. Our marriage was less than a year old, and I am not receiving spousal support, nor do I have access to a vehicle. Additionally, I had to leave my job, lost contact with my extended family, and was separated from my stepdaughter. I am currently homeless and impoverished. My family has been instrumental in providing me with support and assistance. Without their help, I would be in a dire situation. My mental health has been significantly affected by the realization that infidelity was occurring even during the early stages of our relationship. It has become evident that her actions were deceptive and that she was engaged in a charade, leaving me to bear the brunt of the consequences. I was subjected to infidelity and abuse, and I am the sole individual facing the repercussions. My legal counsel, whom I hold in high regard, has advised me that there are limited options available to me. I am in the care of a trusted family friend. How might I process these emotions and begin to heal? I recognize the need to take small, incremental steps, such as seeking employment, but leaving the house currently feels like an insurmountable challenge. I am struggling with severe depression and anxiety in public settings. Even being with friends is extremely taxing and leaves me in a state of distress. By the time I am able to drive home, I feel broken and believe that my situation is unlikely to improve. I am unsure of how to proceed. My wife is bringing the affair partner, AP, to the divorce hearing. A friend informed me that my ex-wife will be bringing the AP to the divorce hearing as a final jab at me. How should I deal with this? Several friends have offered to come as support, but some have said I should just do my best to ignore them. What would you do in this situation? Update 2, my divorce hearing was finally today. My post history contains my full story, but I was abused by my ex. After discovering my wife in bed with another man shortly after Christmas last year, I attempted to reconcile with her. However, as time passed, I continued to witness her engaging in conversations with this individual and even planning trips to meet with him outside of town. Throughout this period, she was sending him sexually explicit messages and images, while simultaneously lying to me and claiming that she had ended all contact. This pattern persisted for some time. Eventually, I informed her of my intention to leave and file for divorce. In response, she reiterated that if I left, she would harm herself. Despite these circumstances, I am still alive. As a result, I have permanently severed ties with her. Upon returning from the courthouse, I engaged in physical exercise, including weightlifting, and I am currently experiencing a sense of well-being. She is unaware of my current residence, having relocated to another city. Additionally, she is unaware of my new employment. This woman, whom I deeply care for and would have done anything for, has taken everything from me: my job, my vehicle, my home, my stepdaughter, my marriage, and potentially my unborn child. Despite my requests, she terminated the pregnancy when I sought a DNA test. This entire year the experience has been unendingly hellish for me, and throughout this period, she has consistently attributed the dissolution of our family to my departure. By the time she arrived this morning, I had already consulted with my lawyer. Our objective was to be present and have the judge sign the necessary documents. I did not even glance in her direction, not even when she attempted to hand me mail from the house. I simply took it and continued walking. I did, however, observe that AP did not accompany her, which was somewhat unusual given her previous assertion to mutual friends that he would be present. I was experiencing considerable stress and emotional distress. Despite my internal distress, I maintained a composed demeanor and elevated my spirits. She appeared to be on the verge of tears, yet I did not outwardly display any emotion. It was only after I returned home that I discovered a note among my mail. AP was absent because he had impregnated another woman. I immediately destroyed the note and discarded it. She had a supportive husband, yet she engaged in deceit, dishonesty, and inflicted emotional distress upon me until I terminated our relationship. Furthermore, she did so for a man who was already involved with other women. Adding insult to injury, AP dislikes his role as a father. He is unmotivated, abusive towards my former spouse, and neglects his daughter. The wife, when they were together, would drop their daughter off with his mother. On any occasion that he had her, he was referred to by his first name, and I was addressed as Dad. His own mother shed tears of joy on Christmas while we shared a drink. She was overjoyed to have me in her life, and this new baby will undoubtedly have a detrimental impact on his already fragile existence. It is my hope that the woman with whom he is having this child will extricate herself from his life as soon as possible, for the sake of the child. Despite my high energy, I feel very alone today, oscillating between feelings of happiness and despair. I apologize if this is a disorganized and incoherent account. I am simply experiencing a peculiar emotional state. I had anticipated a sense of relief, but if I am being candid, I wish that none of us were enduring this suffering.